Next, we're going to London, joined by Marco Vincenzino, Director of Global Strategy Project, a geopolitical risk and international business advisory firm. Thanks very much for talking to us. What kind of world is Trump going to usher in?
Well, that remains a big question. It's actually, apart from the trade issue and the foreign policy front, it's largely a blank slate. He's made many comments that have caused shockwaves, but then again, many of the comments that he's made in public, many others in Washington have made in private. What I think is what distinguishes is the fact that this is a presidential candidate that's made public statements that have actually questioned those elements that underpin American foreign policy since 1945. We live in a changing world, and a changing world is much different from the world of 1945. What happens often in the foreign policy debate, many have sort of acted, not just in the U.S., but I think in Europe also, as if there's continuous continuity. There's a need to adapt to geopolitical realities, but it needs to be done in a much more rhetorically responsible way. But it needs, there needs to be a serious reconsideration. The U.S., the West, NATO, there's new challenges, and they have to adapt to these new realities. And I think what Trump has done in certain ways is he's shocked the system by his rhetoric, but in reality, these things need to be discussed. Many things seriously need to be discussed. Just Trump to determine it within his party, within the Republican Party itself, is understanding what America's role is in a changing world, and also a really frank dialogue between the United States and its allies on where this alliance is going, what underpins it, and the future, the road ahead. It's not going to be an overnight process. It's going to be a fairly difficult one, but a frank discussion has to begin, and has to begin rather sooner than later.
Do you really see him moving closer to Russia?
I don't think moving closer is building a rapprochement. Russia is not an ally of the United States. It's unlikely to ever be an ally of the United States, but at least to have some sort of civil dialogue and working together on many issues around the world. In recent times, obviously, you have the conflict in Ukraine, obviously the conflict in Syria. There's much that's divided both the United States with Europe and Russia. And what he's trying to do, I think, at the present time is at least to begin a dialogue. Would he go as far as to say what the Clinton administration said what the Obama administration said was pushing the restart button with Russia? I don't know if he'll go that far, but at least to begin opening a dialogue. But it's also important not to personalize that relationship between he and Putin, and there was much rhetoric of that during the campaign. There has to be a distinction between the rhetoric of the campaign and the reality of power. And he needs to use the next 2 months there's going to be a lot of uncertainty, sort of state of limbo. He needs to use a lot of rhetoric to reassure allies, to begin a substantive dialogue. So when he begins his administration on Inauguration Day in late January of 2017, there can at least be some form of progress being made. It'll take time. Once again, it's with Hillary Clinton, allies and whether foes or friends, she was a known quantity. There would have been a degree of continuity from the Obama administration. A new era does begin with the Trump administration, and he does at this stage still remain a blank slate.
As you say, a blank slate, as far as we know, he's a relative novice in foreign affairs. Who really is going to be pulling the strings?
I say anyone's going to be pulling the strings. Ultimately, he will be the decision maker. It ultimately depends on who he surrounds himself with. Obviously, as a vice president-elect Pence is someone who knows Capitol Hill. He will be an important bridge between Donald Trump and the world of Washington. He will be playing a critical role. Arguably, he may become one of the most powerful vice presidents in U.S. history because of that gap and that void and lack of experience that Trump has within the political realm. So in that sense, I think Vice President-elect Pence will have a very serious role to play. You also have Senator Jeff Sessions, who's been with Trump since the very beginning. In terms of the standard traditional foreign policy establishment of the Republican Party, much of them were, I say, if not most of them, were against him. They actually signed a letter altogether, basically condemning his policies and rejecting him and backing Hillary Clinton. Will most of them come and start to build bridges with them? That's a big question that remains to be answered. And it's going to, I would say, if whoever does in the next 2 months, we'll see who gets close to him. The campaign is over. The reality of power has to be setting in. And I think the Republican Party, if they want to lead, obviously they have the Congress, they have the Senate, and now they have the White House. In order to make progress and to move the country forward, there has to be a degree of reconciliation within the party itself, and then Trump himself with the opposition, those who did not vote for him. There needs to be that process of reconciliation, although that will take a much longer period of time.
Marco Vincenzino, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.